Happy Sabbath, Covenant Advent Church. And good afternoon and happy Sabbath to those of you who've joined us online. Welcome back for evening study. Thank you for joining, and I pray that you'll be richly blessed. We will start with hymn number 422, Marching to Zion, hymn number 422. Hymn number 422. Come we that love the Lord, and let our joys be known. Join in a song with sweet accord. Join in a song with sweet accord, and thus surround the throne, and thus surround the throne. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to Zion, the beautiful city of God. Let those refuse to sing who never knew our God, but children of the heavenly King, but children of the heavenly King may speak their joys abroad, may speak their joys abroad. We're marching unto Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to heavenly Zion, the beautiful city of God. The hill of Zion yields 1,000 sacred sweets before we reach the heavenly fields, before we reach the heavenly fields. Or walk the golden streets, or walk the golden streets. We're marching unto Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to heavenly Zion, the beautiful city of God. Then let our songs abound, and every tear be dried. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground. We're marching through Emmanuel's ground to fairer worlds on high, to fairer worlds on high. We're marching unto Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. We're marching upward to heavenly Zion, the beautiful city of God. Amen. I'll now turn the evening service over to our pastor, Pastor Lloyd Grubb.
So good evening again, and welcome to our study. And we're going to be looking at a few things this evening. I'm going to be sharing some Bible text in the beginning, then I'm going to have 3 articles and some pictures. Well, one of the articles contains some pictures, 3 or 4 articles here. So just going to try to tie together some more loose ends, and then hopefully by next week we kind of close out the thought. Nope, the following week. Next week is AY. So anyhow, let us pray. Our Father who art in heaven, I thank you for the blessings of your word and for the blessings of knowing thee, the only true God. I pray that you may be with us as we study together, and may the things that we share here may be enlightenment to understand what's happening now today as we learn from the history. This is our prayer in Jesus' name, amen. So my topic for this afternoon here is, it's a composite. So it's white supremacy. We continue with the white supremacy thought from last Sabbath evening to talking about, last week we were talking about Jews, why Jews are hated by white supremacists. So white supremacy, Jews, pork plagues, and COVID-19. I'm going to connect all of them in the next hour, a little bit over an hour, with you here together. So what we're doing is connecting. So we're looking at how pork plague, I really don't want to use the word pork, I want to use the word plagues really, because how these things like swine flu and so forth come together. And how these things put a dent in the ideology of white supremacy. So how pork plagues Jews put a dent in the idea of white supremacy. So a person who think they're superior to everyone, the Jews. So last week I'd covered something. So just kind of quick review before I move on to why am I doing these presentations and why am I studying this from a personal level. So what it is what we're looking at here is throughout history, there is this kind of playing interplay where there's this major focus, and I covered that last week, I think, sufficient, where white supremacists have from history from the 1300s, 1400s, they have a particular history of hate for Jews. And there's some reasons, and I cover some of those, and I'm going to quickly read 2 paragraphs to start, to summarize or to remind us why, one of the reasons why. But they have a particular hate for the Jews. But as I say, the reason why they hate the Jews is because the Jews are, I guess, seem to be good at the game that they're playing, because the white supremacists will say, I'm superior to everybody else. But in all the time, Jews will beat them at the game that they're playing. The Jews will beat them at that game. And so because the Jews beat them at the game they're playing financially, then they tend to, I believe, have a particular hate for Jews, because they'll say, well, the Jews are no good, or the Jews are trying to be Dracula and suck us dry. So because they have this thing with the Jews, it leads me to some other thoughts, but I'm going to share some more reasons now why they have such a hate for the Jews. And what it is often is when they have this type of hate for the Jews, often there's things that outbreak, like plagues, and they'll blame the Jews for the plague. And then they have some other ideology that's here. So to the point now, why am I looking at this month, next month? What is bringing me to this place where I think this is important? Most especially for what's going on in the society, because we saw in the society for the last 5 years, white supremacists became a major player in American politics, news cycle, in the local society. This concept of white supremacy became a discussion in a big way, bigger way than we have ever seen it in the last probably 2 decades. And so it brought me to try to understand more so Nazism, white supremacy. And as I studied it and listened to different interviews, I started to go back to the Dark Ages. It keep bringing back to the Dark Ages. And so as I studied the Dark Ages, the question that came to my mind, which is I'm going to answer in the beginning of this, is why is it for 1,260 years Europe was in a dark age and they could not get out of the Dark Ages? Why was it held? What was the mechanics, the mechanical parts of what kept Europe in a place of they could not move forward, even though they have the gospel? They had the gospel, and they still couldn't move forward. And there's many answers for it. Some of the obvious is that they rejected the Bible. A more specific answer, they rejected the Old Testament with any rules that has to do with Jews. And because of this, they could not progress, even though they had the opportunity and the means of progress. They could not avail themselves of it. And so this is what it is, and this could be for any country, any person. So Western Europe had the gospel, they had the power, but they were stuck in almost what you call a bloodbath. So we're going to cover some of that in the next few minutes. So it was a long period, and this period is fascinating to me, because from this period we get a lot of the ills of society when it comes on to disease, social disruptions, wars, when it comes on to slavery. All of those things came out of this area, but came out most brutal out of this area. Notice in your Bibles, but it's on the board, we're first going to look at the length of the Dark Ages before getting to the mechanics, the nuts and bolts of the Dark Ages, or some of it here today, and I'll do some more of it in March. So nuts and bolts, Revelation 11, verse 1, 2, and 3. Notice here the Bible tells us the Dark Age, tells us about the Dark Ages. Notice it says on your screen here, it says, and there was given me a reed like unto a rod. And the angel stood, saying, rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. So when we talk about in biblical terms measuring anything, we're talking about you're sizing it up, you're making a judgment. In order for you to understand something, you have to understand the depth, the breadth. So the same way how he's asking to measure the temple, I'm also measuring the temple of God, but I'm also measuring the dark ages, the 1,200 years, what really happened, what really went down, and what really went on. So, but here we measure the temple. But when you measure the temple, what you're finding out is that there's a terminus point, an end point, and the end point is judgment, because you measure to make a judgment, right? But the courts which are without the temple leave out. Don't measure those, and measure it not. For it is given unto the Gentiles, so not the Jews now, but literal the Gentiles, and the holy city, and they shall tread underfoot for 42 months. So 42 months, we normally take a month to be 30 days. That's the biblical counting there, and also that's the banking. When you're talking about the banking world, they count 30 days. They calculate credit and mortgage, everything in a 30-day cycle. So if you do 30 times 42, you come up with 1,260. Notice there, that's 1,060. So we believe that the Dark Ages started in 538 and continued until 1798. From the beginning, 538, we can study history, and we can find out what started it off. And it continued until 1798, what brought it to an end. And when we understand those things and understand the nuts and bolts of it, we understand how societies keep themselves in the Dark Ages. And it is similar the world over. Wherever you go, it's the same process. You know, hating of knowledge, ignorance, all that type of stuff. So we're going to get there in a second. So I will give power unto my two witnesses, that's the Old and the New Testament, and they shall prophesy 1,260 days, which is 1,260 days, a day for a year, meaning 1,200 years. If you do 1798 from 538, you get 1,260. And the Bible says they're going to prophesy in sackcloth and ashes. So what it means here, it means that the Bible, the Old and New Testament, the witness, there was still a witness of the Bible. There were still people like the Waldensians and various different groups that preached the Bible, and they preached it for 1,260 years when the Catholic Church reigned, the Roman Empire reigned via the Catholic Church over the rest of Europe and over the rest of the world. The Bible still was alive, but it was alive almost in mourning, right? And I'm sure you can go through the experience and understand. When you know truth and people are ignorant of truth and they're suffering unnecessary, it brings you pain, right? And you wonder, if you witness, you're going to witness in sackcloth. You have to witness so humbly. If you have to beg somebody to do something what's in their best interest, you're literally witness to me in sackcloth and ashes. Because you have to almost be, please, if you would just do this, life will be better for you. So this is that was the experience for 1,260 years. So notice the two numbers line up, and this is where I need to be able to get to the point where I can annotate live. So if you go back to verse 2, you know, there's 42 months. So the temple gonna be trodden underfoot. So you're measuring the temple, but the outer courtyard gonna be trodden underfoot for 42 months. Now this 42 months, we're supposed to be in the holy place. If you never study it with me, you're not gonna know what I'm talking about. But I must have to just roll by because of time. You're gonna be the holy place. But the Gentiles, they're out there in the outer court. What's in the outer courtyard? The sacrifice. So if you look at Europe for 1,260 years, from 538 to 1798, all their art is about the crucifixion of Jesus. Come on now. Somebody got a witness to the beautiful of the Bible, the power of the Bible right there. For if even the art, you can see that the John was right. John nailed it. This is prophecy here. This is uncontrovertible prophecy. And this has been proven by archaeology that this was written hundreds of years, over 500 or something years before the event happened. And John called it. And for 538 until 1798, if you look at the art of Europe, it was about blood and gore and death. And if you look at the art, it was like that, and the lives of the people were like that. And that's what we're going to cover today. So this people now will be saying, I'm the greatest, I'm the best. But it's just blood, gore, destruction, everything. For 42 months, which is 1,260 days. Then just in case you didn't get it, the Bible then say that the gospel shall be prophesied for 1,260 years, same time period again. So why? What is it that the Bible could not freely be preached? Because remember, for that dark ages, the Bible could not be freely preached. You couldn't preach truth, especially truths that I guess I would say the Jews held there, like the cleanliness laws. So we're going to cover some of that. The cleanliness, and there was constant outbreaks of diseases. The more the people reject rules when they come on to health, is the more they suffer plagues. Notice again another text. So we just read Revelation 11. Notice, just in case somebody thinking, this is just some side note, some major concept in the Bible. Revelation, and in the prophetic writings of the Bible. Revelation 12 verse 6. Revelation 12 verse 6. Notice it says here, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she at a place prepared of God, that she should be fed there for 1,260 years. So notice, the Gentiles are going to trample on the foot for 1,260 years. They have 42 months. They have the other courtyard. The gospel is going to be prophesied for 42 months. And now here it says the woman, God's true church, the faithful people in that time period, was going to be in the wilderness for 1,260 years. Same time period. So he's talking about three different things, but he's talking about the same time period. So then we have to say, well, what is this time period? Historians simply call it the Dark Ages. Why was it so dark? And why did it go on for so long? And so my question here, is it that God wanted to go on for so long, or it was something else going on that God allowed to go on for 1,260 years? Very long time. You could live and live to be 80. Most people weren't living to be 80. And that's 2 cycles of 40, and you still didn't see nothing yet. Very fascinating. Notice again, Daniel 7, verse 24 and 25. So somebody could say, oh, that's just in Revelation. Here we're going to find the same time period again, repeated. And the Lord is saying, for this time period, it's going to be special to world history. Notice here, and 10 horns out of the kingdoms are 10 kings that shall arise, and another shall arise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So historically, if you've studied history, you know this is true. When the papacy or the Pope rose to power, which was the Bishop of Rome, and he got full ascendancy over the 10 tribes of, or the 10 areas of Europe. He came from Italy himself. He ordered to remove or destroy 3 of the kingdoms of the Western European Empire that was formerly part of what we know as Rome, the Kingdom of Rome. The last empire that was removed by France. France destroyed the last of the 3 nations. So 3 nations were destroyed, and their leadership were taken away from them. Out of those 3 nations, the last one that was removed at 538 by French general. The French general destroyed them and put into power the Pope with his military. In 1798, at the end of the 1,260 years, historical facts, the French general Berthier went into Rome, arrested the Pope, and take the power away from Rome. So the French put him in power, and the French removed him from power. Fascinating enough, at the same time, it was France who dealt a blow to Britain because they were having a war against Britain, and support America to remove America from power at the same time. To remove, the British from power in America at the same time. So France hit Italy, take out the Pope, but they're the one that put in the Pope 1,200 and something years. Remember, France is viewed in biblical terms and historical terms as the most pagan nation on the planet. But they're the one that put the Pope in Rome. Fascinating, the most pagan group put the Pope in power, and the most pagan group took him out. But they also are the one that gave us the Statue of Liberty because they supported the Civil War or the American Revolutionary War, and they took the British out of commission in America. Fascinating. France, that's the way. And one day I'm going to do a study on them because they're fascinating, and they're going to be, I believe, prophetically as we go down, be a game player in these last days. So anyhow, so notice here, he shall be diverse in the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. After he subdued 3 kings at 530, he sit on the papacy. And this religious political power that we call the papal system for 1,260 years kept the world in darkness and tyranny and rape and murder and slavery and every debauchery that we can think about. But while doing it, claiming to be God and claiming to be superior. So we want to know what mechanically happened that made it that the world could not break out of this darkness. Has the Roman entity with its religious power gripped the world? And what are we preparing for right now in America? As we see close and close, America getting close to what we call a theocracy, where the Protestants of the United States have a chokehold on the American politics and machinery and military. This is where we're going. So I'm giving it away because we have no surprises here. So notice verse 25. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints, those who were in the wilderness for 1,260 years, shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. That's why most of Christianity go to church on Sunday, the venerable day of the sun worship day, instead of going to church on the biblical Sabbath, because they don't want to be like the Jews. So change time and law, and they shall be given into his hand. Notice now, given into his hand until times, and dividing of times. So somebody say, well, you've been talking about so far 1,260 days. How do you come, or years? How do you come now? How do you explain now times, dividing of times? Because remember, if time represents a whole cycle of the sun, just go by that. And you say times is 360 again, and times is double 360, and dividing of time is half of 360. You're going to come, if you do the math, to 1,260 years or days. 1260. Times, dividing of times. It's the same time signature, timestamp that we read 3 times so far. 3 times so far in Revelation, and we read it now here in Daniel this time. What is it that the Bible authors and the prophecy and the God himself is so fascinated or so concentrated about this time period? What happened in the world at this time period? Last example here in Revelation, back to Revelation 12, verse 14. We see it now a 5th time in the Bible, the same time stamp and time signature. Revelation 12, verse 14. So what is going on in this time? Notice here, and unto the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness to her place, where she is nourished for a time. Now notice again, times, and half a time. There before, it used the word dividing of time. Here, they used the phrase 1,260 and 3 score, or 3 score 60, wherever you go. But here now, it says time, times, and now half a time. So if somebody say, Lord, why will you say divide means to divide in 2? Why couldn't you divide in 3? Because in this text, it gives you the insight that the division has to be in half. Half is 2. From the face of the serpent. So who was chasing the woman, or what we call the Waldensians and the Albigenses and all these people who were persecuting them? There's only one entity that admit to murdering Christians and to persecute people in the Dark Ages, and that's the Catholic Church. So when we see that, but here somebody said, Lord, but the text didn't say Catholic Church, it says serpent. Well, if you check it out, what you find is that the Catholic Church is the great serpentine church. Even their buildings and all this stuff is about the serpent. It's this great serpent worship or Satan worship. And in the future, I'll pull up some pictures and show you remarkable serpentine buildings, serpentine things, buildings built like serpent. But you just don't, when I show you the picture, you'll see. I've done it here before, and you've seen it. Very fascinating serpentine thing. So when we put those together, what we come up with is the Dark Ages. So in the future, I'm going to have to go over this again, because I'm going to have to explain to you why do we spend so much, why am I spending time talking about things that have to do with Dark Ages? Because I believe we have a system right now in place via the churches to bring us back to the Dark Ages, back to the death and the destruction and everything that is of the devil. So that's what it is. So I explained that. So let's go now to my first read here. And I'm going to take you now to this. So this is now to remind you where we were last week. So I read this writing up, a write-up from Wikipedia. So a quick summary here. So this was read last week, just highlighting just highlight the first part. I'm making a note to myself. And this is an insight as to why they look at Jews with suspicion. I write at the best. So here we go. This is why they look at Jews. So the Black Death, persecution, and massacre were a series of violent attacks on Jewish communities, falsely blamed for outbreaks of the Black Death in Europe between 1348 and 1351. Now, this is a paragraph of that article. I just want to read one part of it. There are many possible reasons why Jews were accused to be the cause of the plague. One reason was because there was a general sense of anti-Semitism in the 14th century. Jews were also isolated in ghettos, so they had social distancing, right? Which meant in some places that Jews were less affected. Additionally, there are many Jewish laws that promote cleanliness, right? Is that true? Yeah. When you grew up, you hear this idea that cleanliness is next to what? Godliness. So that means uncleanliness is next to serpent, right? A Jew must wash his hand and her hand before eating bread, right? Does that make sense? Because if you're going to eat and touch the food, then you could spread disease, right? So, but if you go to the toilet and wash your hands, you could spread disease. And also after using the bathroom. So just imagine now how would I say this? How this, to me, is fascinating, because imagine you have a people who are going to massacre another group of people who washes their hand after using the bathroom and see them as enemies, right? And I guarantee if you go to any public restroom and put up a camera, what are you going to notice? You're going to notice that people are going to walk out and not wash their hands today, right? This is something. So imagine you're catching a disease like the plague, and people are dying. I'm going to read some of it towards the end. And dying at massive rates, and they're blaming the people who wash their hand after they use the bathroom or the restroom or the toilet. You see? Is that ignorance? You can see how we kept these areas in darkness and the world in darkness, because you would attack somebody as being wicked for against people wash their hands. People wash their hands, the bad people. Did we hear echoes of that last year? Come on now. A Jew must wash his hand before eating and drinking. It was customary for Jews to bathe once a week before Sabbath. All right? So is that a bad thing? But you can imagine people saying, things were so bad, people said they need to die. They bathe once a week. You bad. You bad guy. Right? We don't bathe. Once a year we bathe. So, is it a problem? Because I remember I used to study here about people having like carbuncles. You know, like a boil. But a carbuncle is even bigger. Right? Because people wouldn't bathe much. So the skin, things just build up on the skin, build up on the skin, build up until it just break out into like a big pus, and, you know, the system can't clean itself, right? And then somebody over there bathe once a week and say, man, this is bad people. See, that's how things become upside down and right side up. Notice again, a corpse must be washed before burial, and so on. So we're going to deal with some of the so on, which is, we're going to talk now about the plagues, pork and stuff. So a corpse, right, must be washed before burial. What's happening now when they come on to corpse? Sometimes they don't even want to make the family get the corpse. They want to burn it. And they want to have some proper protocol where they put it in double bags, or they put it in zip it in a body bag, and then zip it in a bag to make sure that there's no contamination. We saw that when Ebola broke out. What happened in Ebola? The people would cry and touch the body and weep over the body, and then they caught Ebola. Then they die. Then somebody weep over their body, then they caught the Ebola. Then they die. Until they realize they have to break the custom of the burial rites, because that was ignorance. But with the Jewish system, the Lord already, with the Old Testament system and the biblical system, you cannot handle the corpse. If you handle the corpse, you're defiled. You have to quarantine yourself. You have to separate yourself. That was the principle. And you could not touch a dead body just for any reason. And if you did, you have to be quarantined. You have to be put aside. So we're going to talk about some of that. So what it is. So now here, I'm going to go online with this article. I'm going to share this article, because this article now going to just kind of tab some things for you. So because remember, if we're ignorant of certain laws when it comes on to how to deal with diseases, we are not going to understand how disease work, right? So, I'm going to read one more article before I go to that article. Let's go to this article. I'm going to set like, just in case you have not been, I'm not going to read all of that, trust me. I'm going to read some of it, but no. So, this article is important for me because this article was sent to me last year about the same time, sometime in the beginning of February. So it's a year ago I read this article. And Sister Martha had sent me this article from New York Times. And I remember reading this article, and then I was looking for some other material, and then the article, I remember reading something, and I said, I need to find an article that Sister Martha had sent to me a year ago, right? So I found it, and telling Sister Martha also that I found the article. And from New York Times, and I want to share with you, to give you a background before I share with you the article about pork in particular, but it's going to give you a little insight. So to understand the Wuhan coronavirus, look to the epidemic triangle. So remember, this was written before we were certain that this hit America, because this is 2020, just in case you're not following here. I think you can see it on the board, right? So this is 2020. January 30th. So this is over a year old. So this is make it even more important, because this got time to season and marinate in time. So this is Dr. Dan Werb. All right, so 5 cases of the mysterious Wuhan coronavirus has been confirmed in the United States, giving rise to concern about a potential global pandemic. Remember, this is a year ago, so the pandemic didn't hit yet. We've seen this story before as health authorities work with threadbare data, try to walk the line between epidemic readiness and needless panic. Is this new outbreak poised to become the next AIDS pandemic or a new SARS, which was stopped in its tracks after 774 deaths? To cut through the headlines, we can use a simple concept called the epidemic triangle, right? Employed by epidemiologists since the discipline's earliest days. It is indispensable to predict whether localized outbreak will transform into full-blown epidemic. This is the part now I want you to read, but I just want you to get the background. The epidemic triangle, this concept here, 3 different things happening, 3 different points, is essentially an equation. It posits that every outbreak, regardless of its specific traits, is dependent upon an interplay between 3 factors: the pathogen, the agent causing infection, so in our discussion here will be coronavirus; the host, the organism at risk of infection; and the environment, setting where the infection occur. So I'm going to repeat that for you because it's going to move. It's going to go on. So us, we're the host, and we're the one that worried about getting infected. Then there's an environment around, whatever that environment is. This is going to be important for the next article I'm going to read. And then there is the disease itself. So the disease needs a host, but also the disease function better when there's an environment that's going to make the disease run. Does that make sense? Every single epidemic, be it the flu, cholera, or even behavioral epidemic like drunken driving, is a result of a dynamic shift in one of these points of the epidemic triangle, which then cause a domino effect leading to a sudden explosion of new cases. So you can see a situation happen. There's the drugs, it could be the alcohol, the host, and then there's the environment. Some environment feeds it more, others feeds it less. So I could be susceptible to alcohol. The alcohol exists, but wrong environment could make me even more susceptible. Right environment could make me less susceptible. Is that clear? Right. So the environment plays. As I said, this is going to be important for our next article, but I needed this article to kind of fill in that void for you. Because remember, we're still looking at, somebody say, well, what does that have to do with white supremacy? I get there. In one classic example of this phenomena, we have an environmental shift to thank for the emergence of the global flu pandemic. In the mid-16th century, what century? 16th century. So we're going back again to where? Dark Ages time when other things were going on. Now we're going to China. In the mid-16th century, ducks were introduced to Chinese rice paddies to feed on the insects that were destroying crops. That meant ducks joined together common feature of Chinese farm. So that meant ducks joined another common feature of Chinese farm, pigs. The ducks' unique biology makes it a generous reservoir for a vast number of viruses, while pigs are uncannily efficient at mixing different viruses together into new strains and then passing them on to humans. But you see in the environment. So we, the hosts, the ducks and the pigs have diseases that we're susceptible to, but you need an environmental change. What happened? They mixed these two animals that normally would mix in nature because they needed the ducks to take care of some pathogen that was there. The ducks they're disease filled because they're unclean animals. The pigs are unclean animals, but now the two of them now are there in this rice paddy. And the humans are there in the rice paddy. You see that? So that's the triangle. What happened? Notice here, breeding these two animals in proximity quickly led to the combination and transmission of a new virus strain, novel and highly virulent pathogen, hybrid pig duck influenza, then cross-species barrier, and have been tormenting humans ever since. You see how it happened? 1600. Yeah, rice fields, the rice fields, right? This wet, swampy area, not a good environment. Bad environment for disease, right? But great environment for a pig and great environment for a duck. Who would have thunk, right? So great environment for both, but now you introduce these two that normally would not deal with each other, so to speak, but now they're living amongst each other. And both of them are great reservoirs for disease and mix, and the pig, a unique creature for mixing disease together. So he takes now the duck disease, he mix it and match it, and boom, you have explosion. You have something now that is a plague to us that we have to deal with on a regular basis. So if you pay attention to coronavirus, we're going to keep reading on this one because I want you to get this one, so I'm going to take a piece of the next article. If you have paid attention to coronavirus, what you have realized is that what they're saying is that there was some mixing going on, and that's what they believe still. They have not proven yet. If it's a lab, if they mix it in a lab by genetic engineered, or if it was mixed in nature, where they introduced things that normally would not deal in nature in the Rwanda market, and then now you came up with now a new novel disease. But this historical has happened. Somebody could say, oh no, you have to happen in a lab. But here we have history that has happened before, in the Dark Ages, in that same time period where there was just a lot of ignorance. But some of that ignorance still is with us in a big way. Notice I'm going to keep reading here. The family of coronavirus, so-called because they resemble glowing crowns, that includes the new one strain, are exceptionally challenging to control. Keep that in mind, because remember, what are we dealing with it right now? We're dealing with what we call variants, right? the virus is constantly changing, but there's something in the environment causing the change. Mark my word. So notice there, coronavirus is responsible for the common cold, pneumonia, bronchitis. But the coronavirus family is sprawling and includes deadly outliers like the the severe acute respiratory syndrome or Middle East respiratory syndrome, MERS, which have a fatality rate of 15% and 35%. So the death rate would have been way out of control if it was these two, respectively. The big question then is whether the Wuhan coronavirus is closer to the common cold or to SARS. That's the big question. Where does it land? Why its case fatality rate is unknown. As of Wednesday, there were 6,000 confirmed cases worldwide. Remember, we're reading this. This is happening. This is a year ago article. And 80 outside of mainland China, and at least 130 people have died. So notice here, last week the World Health Organization convened a meeting, and they did not want to deal with it. But notice here, I doubt the epidemic triangle is critical in helping the World Organization navigate this process. In this outbreak, because of the substantive shift in the genetic makeup of an old pathogen, a change in the vulnerability of the host population, or an alteration of the environment that has shaped the threat emanating from Wuhan. So let's just talk a little bit about that here. So what it is that, and this has been a question for me, I don't fully have the answer for this, but I'm going to throw it out there to you. It could be something changing us as human beings. And from that point of view, I think there's a possibility that we're faced with a new disease, but we have a new diet lifestyle, right? Because remember, coronavirus is basically set on fire from the host point of view by the fast food diet and lifestyle. The more people the more people kept inflamed by inflammatory foods that are deep fried foods and all that, is the more the coronavirus work havoc in their body. So keep that in mind. That's one thing. So that's the host point of view. Environmental point of view, the next article I'm going to deal with, going to talk about that. Could something have changed in the environment that made the disease more susceptible? Because remember, the pigs are masters of cooking up a disease and kicking it up, but other animals can do this also. And what we know is with coronavirus is particularly adept to transformation, even if the environment is bad. So the disease itself is a highly mutating disease. And I'll take a little bit more piece from here and I'll move on to something else. So we have this type of setup. And somebody will say, well, dark ages, but you talk about China. But remember, what I'm showing you here, that all the ignorance, wherever we're dealing with it, will lead to keeping people in even more ignorance and keeping death and destruction high. And there's certain animals that are great for this. And as I note there, pigs are one, ducks, rats, and so forth. We're getting there. Just a little bit more from this one. So first we need to know how much of a shift this new pathogen is from previous coronavirus strains. And still we haven't got a clear answer for that a year later. Based on the infective potential and virulent, judging from the rapid rise of cases since the first cluster reported in December 34th, the new Wuhan strain could very well be highly infective. For perspective, SARS have a relatively low basic reproduction ratio, which is RO equal 0.5, so not very good at reproducing. That means that every 2 cases of SARS result in 1 additional infection. So you're going from 2 to 1, so hard to reproduce. Very early estimates shared by WHO, World Health Organization, suggest that Wuhan strain has a reproduction of 1.4 to 2.5. Because of the lockdown and the various different measures, it is not so, but it would be, I guess, if it was left unchecked. Producing roughly 2 secondary cases for each initial infection, which places slightly higher than the seasonal flu. For perspective, and measles has a reproduction of, for every 1 person, 12 to 18 people could get it. Measles, very highly contagious. So what's happening there? You have a disease that some of the same reason why there was so much death and destruction in the Dark Ages would have been repeated. Why were there so much death and destruction in Dark Ages? Because certain basic rules were not followed. And a lot of those rules are not followed because people had this false idea about genetics, in a sense of I'm superior because of genetics, not because of intelligence. Very important to understand. So a person who thinks they're superior because of their genetics is at a disadvantage than a person who is superior per se because of their, per se, quote unquote, because of their philosophy. So in other words, if there's a disease running and I believe in wearing a mask, social distancing, quarantine, washing my hand, taking supplements, building up my immune system, I'm going to fare better than somebody who say, I'm genetically superior. I'm the man. I was born with superior genetics. Because that person is at a disadvantage. And that's my point. That's the point of all of this. So what happened is that there was more death and destruction in Dark Ages from those who were superior, quote unquote, than for those who were inferior. An example of this would be the Jews, because the Jews wash their hands. And they will cut the transmission rate. Give you an example. You could have the CDC come out, and the CDC say, listen, we can cut the transmission of the virus by wearing face masks by 90%. That's what the CDC say. Regular people say, okay, we comply because that's what the government say or because we believe in it. Evangelicals come out and say, no, our people who are, I guess they're superior, say, oh, they're taking away our rights. Who's right? CDC, they're right. You kill the transmission by 90%. They're right. So, if the new coronavirus RO remains low as more data becomes available, we can be relatively confident that surveillance and quarantine, I'm going to talk about quarantine at the end, looking at my time, I have about half an hour, will stem its spread, though these measures become steadily less effective as the RO increase. Second, we have to ask how this outbreak might be explained by a shift in the vulnerability of the host, human beings. So this is the part that I'm not covering today, but I really believe that one has to understand. The diet and lifestyle that we practice is not good for disease, dealing with the disease bodily, because it weakens our system. It makes us easy to be inflamed by diseases. Inflammation is one of our biggest headaches in multiple diseases. And this disease is in Covid-19, just in case you don't know what I'm talking about. Covid-19 is an inflammatory disease, but so is fast food and deep fried food. Is an inflammatory disease themselves. So that's important to understand. So that is secondarily the host, but that leaves the environment, the last point of the epidemic triangle. And this is where things get complicated, and this is what I'm going to deal with in my reading in a few minutes. As China economy has expanded, the number of Chinese citizens taken to the skies have risen astronomically. Much has been made about the week's Lunar New Year celebration, and rightly so. It is the world's largest human migration, with as many as 3 billion planned trips by car, train, plane within China over a 2-week period. This was future of this article. The challenges of quarantine during this migration are staggering. China, though, is good at doing this. And the shift in the environment is the next thing. So now I'm going to take a piece of the other article. I'm going to show you now what is something that's going on that has to do with a shift in the environment. Something has changed. So now here's the thing. Many people have been saying, many scientists have been saying, not people, many scientists have been saying that for years now, and I've been preaching this for years, that we were due for an outbreak. And one of the reasons they were talking about we're due for outbreak is because how we deal with animals. Not just pork, but pork is a good example. You're going to see from parts of this article. You're going to have to read this article yourself because it's a long article. I only have half an hour or so. So what this article goes into is how the animal industry, how we grow animals, and how we do animal industry in husbandry, how this is making these diseases become more repetitive. They're happening more frequent, right? And this is part of what is important for you to understand. Because what it is that a lot of these animals and the way we treat these animals, it's either biblical, it's unsound, and it's unreasonable, unbiblical. Plus, eating some of these animals shouldn't eat. Notice all the animals that have been associated with rapid disease transmission are animals that are banned by the Bible, that technically if a person follows the Old Testament, which Protestants don't, they will not eat these animals. These animals are forbidden by God to be eaten. They're there as scavengers and to kill and to eat dead carcasses. And we eat these animals. And the number one, what we eat is pork. This is the number one eaten meat in the world. Number one eaten meat in China. But also Chinese have been eating a lot of like pangolin, bats, and all those animals are forbidden by God to eat. Dogs, cats, all forbidden by God. All, if eaten, will transmit diseases, rapid amount of disease. And this article will lay that out for you, some of it. So just keep that in mind. So imagine now, there's a guy and he's like, I'm the greatest, I'm the best. And I eat pigs. Is he going to be the greatest and best? No. Then he's going to see somebody over there and he said, they're less than me, but they don't eat pigs. And they're doing better than me, not only financially, because I covered that last week, but health-wise, they're doing better. And he's going to be like, man, these people make me look bad because they're doing better health-wise and they're doing better financially. But
the greatest and the best.
yes, please.
But temporarily.
Temporarily?
Like, this one's dead. Oh, no.
No, it's not. It's alive. It's alive.
He can be better and the best, but temporarily, like we see
He's going to lose.
the guy, Apple guy.
Oh, yeah. Excellent example. Yeah.
He exceeded and he was the best at what he did, but
Didn't survive for too long.
he didn't survive.
Right. Didn't survive for too long. He burned himself out. Right. There's principles you still have to follow. Like being the best doesn't mean that your health won't fail. Right? So you still have to follow some principles, and that's the problem. So notice here now, just to get to the point, I think hopefully you got the point I'm making. So when we talk about this person saying genetically I'm the best, probably they're better than me, but I can win at the game if I know how to take care of my body. This person is saying that I hate these people, but probably you should pay attention to what they're doing. Probably they're doing something right. And that means I'm going to follow them in everything they do, but they're doing something right. You can't discount what they're doing right, because probably going to benefit you. Probably if they have less disease in the community because they wash their hand, probably we should follow them. If they have less disease because they wear a face mask or because they do social distancing, use hand sanitizer, probably I should take note. Remember, Taiwan is having, I think, no outbreak at this point. They shut the disease down. New Zealand for the most part, Australia for the most part. But they're not walking around saying, "Oh, I'm superior. I'm not Thailand, but Taiwan." Taiwan is not saying I'm Taiwan superior. They're just following some proper scientific protocol and they're getting better results. Does that mean they're superior? No, it just means the principles they're following works, and that's the problem. And that's where idiocy and ignorance comes in to destroy us. So notice here, this is written by this person here, Zanan. As like canon, I guess. And it is last year, the end of last year. Now, notice this. Research link industrial pig farming and virus outbreak. So just in case you say, oh, no, it's just you talking about this. No, this is something well documented. And there's more articles. I just decided to just share this one. So here's a quick summary. Research has found a surprising correlation in Brazil, the US, and Germany. Areas with many pigs have higher COVID infectious rate. You see that? More pigs, more infectious rate. So imagine you're saying, oh, they're less than me. Well, they have less pig and they have less infection. Is that they're less than you? No, it's just, you have to understand, it's the ignorance to understand what that animal is. That animal is dangerous. Notice here, in Brazil, more than 70% of pigs are raised in confinement. In what? Does that look good to you or look bad? Look bad, right? Without access to sunlight, what does sunlight produce? Vitamin D. What is vitamin D? A hormone that is a steroidal hormone that takes on inflammation and is active and passive immune protection for our bodies. Without access to sunlight and fed with transgenic. What is a transgenic? A transgenic is some type of organism that is modified to have more than one different components from different phyla or different type of setting. So it could have plant and animal inside of it. It's something that is manipulated in a lab. Soybean-based animal food. So it's soybean-based animal food that is transgenic. That means now something in the environment is causing something that should never have happened, period, no way. So if you go to the average person that's eating pork and you say to them, pork is bad, forget about that, it's beyond bad. It is something that is being fed with transgenic food. They might not be eating transgenic food or modified food, GMO food, but they're eating something being fed GMO food. Then they eat the GMO fed pig, which shouldn't be eaten in the first place. And then now, is their body weaker or stronger? I say weaker because notice, again, surprising another case. Notice, again, another point. Pigs can catch avian flu and other human influenza virus at the same time, resulting in a novel combination. Remember, the pig is a great mixer, as I covered before. That the pig farm potential laboratory, that makes pig farm a potential laboratories for emergence of new disease. So what did we cover? Back in the 1600s, they blended the pigs on the rice paddy or the rice farms or whatever you call them with ducks. The pigs took the duck disease, blended us, and gave us this nice thing that we've been fighting with forever. Pig is a good blender. Now the pig now can catch the avian flu and other human influenza, blend it together, and then say, voila, death and destruction. You have a new virus, and you say, okay, what is happening? Why is this thing so dangerous? Remember what they were saying? You would have, I think the bats would come into the farmer's market, and I think they would drop their droppings, and then it could be on the pig or on the pangolin, and then you have now a new disease. And somebody said that's genetically engineered. Probably just naturally like that. And if you have time, it's disturbing. We can go on YouTube and type in swine outbreak 2019. And you'll find that there was a major swine flu outbreak in China. And they had to burn the pigs alive and bury the pigs in graves. You can watch it and can get excited and say, this is what they have to do to the pig. It's disturbing. But you can say, I encourage you to get disturbed. So notice here, record pork export from Brazil signal even greater deforestation in the country as land is cleared to grow soybean used in animal feed. So instead of people eating their soybean or their tofu or their whatever, what they do, they feed it to the pigs and then eat the pigs. So it's a second-hand food. Now, because of the sake of time, I'm going to read some of this article, but what I'm going to do for you, I'm going to show you a few pictures. So this first picture here is when they're tracking the coronavirus outbreak. They're looking at the areas now that has the largest amount of coronavirus and the largest amount of pig raising. And what they find, it is uncanny. It is the same. So this is in, I think, South Carolina. Oh, no, sorry. This is in the southern part of Brazil, right? This is one of the biggest pig growing areas in the world. And this is one of the areas that have the largest outbreaks of coronavirus. So they find wherever you find large amount of pigs, there's a large coronavirus outbreak. You see that? Notice here, it's in that area. And notice here, this is the pig swine production. You notice it's in the left part of the county. I don't know if it's a county or a region. It's called the Santa Catarina, right, SC. And notice now, COVID cases. You see the similarity? You see that? I'm looking at whatever I'm advertising. I have the pictures, but I forget to email it to myself. So notice that again. You see that? I'll blow it up for you. Well, I won't blow it up for you. But you see that, right? I'm going to show you a set of pictures. Look the overlap now. This overlap is in Brazil again. This is in another area in Brazil that has, this is a southern side. And notice you can see again, wherever you have large amount of pigs is where you have the same area of large amount of COVID cases. You see the overlap? I'm going to read some of the article for you, but I want to see the pictures. I want you to get it. Because when you see, look at America now. Look at the COVID pig areas. You see again? North Carolina, South Carolina. And you see South Dakota, North Dakota. You see where the pigs are located? And COVID is located. Wherever you find high concentration, you find the same concentration. So you're looking at that map and I think it's something to do with what the pig either does in the body or the pig itself is a transformer of the thing. Notice again, they ask why pig. As I say, I'm not going to be able to go over all of this, but one of the reasons what they say is how the pigs are raised. The pigs are raised in I can't say inhumane way, but in animal way. I don't know how to say it. Very harsh way. All right, inhumane. Notice here, these are areas where they are in the northern side of we call it Brazil, and this is where they're doing deforestation. All right. Most deforestation municipalities are increased population of agriculture established using agrotoxins. Right. So this is. Now remember what the guy was saying from last year, that the question is it the host, is it the animal, or is it the disease? Now in this situation, it could be two things or three things or one thing. But when we look at this, we see there's a lot of genetically engineered beans being used to grow the pig. Then there is a lot of chemical being used to deforest the area and to sustain the pig production, because you have to have a lot of antibiotics. And for years, many people have been saying we're going to create a superbug one day that's going to wipe out all the people. Here we are, and I believe it is this combination of how they grow these animals and they deforest the areas that are having it. Just in case somebody say, well, okay, I go back here. There was another picture I wanted to share, and it's a picture in Germany also. But I don't have the German picture. Oh, I know why, because I have a picture of the major pork areas, and you find like in places in Germany, you have the same kind of problem. And Germany has been having one of the highest outbreak. And if you look at the countries that have the top producers of pigs and the top consumers of pigs, you'll find that there's an overlap between what is happening. And the number one country that consumes pigs is China. China consumes 41% of all the protein they eat, or the meat they eat, is actually pork. And so they're having a massive outbreak. But in the past, I think Denmark used to be the number one per capita per 100,000 people of pig consumption or pork consumption. And again, if you look at those areas, you'll find the concept of outbreak. I pull back again to remind you, when you look at the outbreak, one of the outbreaks that were happening and caused a mutation of coronavirus was in the mink population. The mink had the outbreak, they had an outbreak in mink, and the outbreak also happened in the Midwest, over in the same area that they have the big pig production. They do big mink production, and also in the same area in various European countries, they had mink production. They had to cull the mink, they have to kill the mink, because if they didn't, they're afraid that it would create another strain. They did create a strain, but they will create another epidemic. So keep that in mind. Let me take you a piece of this article, and I have a few more things to share before we close. No, so in recent months, just piece of it I'm going to take. In recent months, meat packing companies in different parts of the world has been associated with large clusters of COVID infections. Who have heard this? Yes. Right, you've heard this, right? The Tony's meat processing plant in North Rhine-Westphalia, Germany, was temporarily closed, and U.S.-based pork processor Smithfield became a major focus of the disease in South Dakota, one of the countries least populated states. So you have a very low populated state, but they had one of the biggest outbreaks. South Dakota, North Dakota, those areas. You watch those areas. In Brazil, complaints abound about COVID-19 at slaughterhouses. 20% of the industry's workers have been infected, according to the National Federation of Workers in Food and Related Industry. These outbreaks, along with China's global leadership as a pork producer, caught the attention of 3 researchers who started looking into the matter. And these people are Lisa Mies from Bombardier, geographic professor, and then you have the person from Germany and then the person from Brazil. In 2 pages, these they show the spatial correlation. Spatial, that means it's not rock solid, right? Between increased numbers of COVID-19 infection and intense pig farming in Brazil, the US, and Germany. They also put forward an hypothesis, still unproven, that current agricultural method, specifically industrial pig farming, may favor the spread of virus with animals as contamination vectors. This hypothesis, but spatial correlation is very high, says Bombardier. So what they're saying is that we don't have it rock solid, but we have good correlation in it, and it's very, very high correlation. Now, I say it is high because I've been looking for this data to come out for months now. From I think last year summer, I've been looking for this data, and I've been finding more. So in the upcoming weeks, I'll be sharing some other stuff with you here. That is strong because remember, I'm gonna pause here a little bit again, and I'm gonna take probably 2 more paragraphs here, and I'm gonna jump. You can read the whole thing; it's a long read for yourself. That you have the triangle, you have the disease, you have me, the host, and then you have the environment. All these 3 things can work in favor of the disease, so to speak. The disease itself can mutate, so it has its own strengths. But I myself can be weak in my body, so I can weaken my system or I can strengthen my system. And then now you have the environment. The environment could be filled with genetic engineered products. It could be filled with bad growing sanitation for the animals, all these things. And now the disease gets into the animal makes it because it's perfect, because it's so weakened. Boom, I now get infected. Notice here, they present data, they presented the state of Santa Catarina, which account for 25% of Brazil's pork production and a high COVID-19 infection rate as evidence of their first paper. The low population density in the state's western region compared to the more crowded coastal areas where infection rates are high should have slowed the spread of the coronavirus inland, but it wasn't the case. All right, so those maps I will show you. The novel coronavirus is moving to smaller towns in Brazil, and that is highly connected to meat packers. This has to do with 2 things: unhealthy human labor and poor condition for pig farming. The paper warns about untreated pig excrement entering into water bodies, posing the risk of infecting drinking water and spreading diseases. Testing pigs' waste would be crucial, she says. I want to note that I was listening to a report from a young man in one of the towns, I can't remember towns now, in Brazil, and he said that 80% of the city, of a 3 million people, it was a 3 million city, 80% of them don't have indoor water, fresh drinking water and sewage treatment. 80%. Is that Dark Ages talk? The spatial correlation between COVID-19 and pig farming and low population density found in Santa Catarina is repeated in other states in southern Brazil, a region that accounts for 66% of the country's pork production. The same pattern is seen in the United States. Northwest Germany, which has the highest pig production in the country, repeats the spatial correlation, but with a higher population density, unlike the other two countries analyzed in the second paper on the topic, and they give the link there. So you can see Brazil, and then you can see the connection as I showed you. Then you can see the connection. So here's the thing I'm going to read and I move on. Why pigs? Why pigs? Notice it says here, the widespread theory that SARS-CoV-2, the virus that causes COVID-19, spread from a wet market in Wuhan, China, was challenged in research published in May. According to that study, the virus has been circulated in China before that. And the first animal to human transmission occurred before the outbreak linked to the market. Experts from the Wuhan Institute of Virology also said initial transmission in SARS-CoV-2 did not occur at the market, which served instead as a site where it is further disseminated. Scientists also discount the theory that the virus was genetically engineered in a lab and then somehow got out. What many experts believe, though, is that there was likely an intermediary host between bats where the virus is spread to originate, is suspected to originate from, and humans. China is the world's largest pork producer, and Hubei province, where Wuhan is located, is one of China's 5 largest pork producer. There are many similarities between pigs and us, from the respiratory system to the gastrointestinal system, Bob Barty says. Pigs can catch the avian flu virus and the human influenza virus at the same time, then engender novel combination that can transmit again and infect human beings. This happened in March 2009 with the flu outbreak that had hit the world then, H1N1, you remember this. And more studies have been put forward. They include a version of H1N1 with a potential pandemic characteristic. According to the study, the virus posed no imminent threat, but scientists have called for urgent, rigorous monitoring of the virus and population of the pork industry. So, and they talk about intensive pig production and how they're using soybean to do that. So I close that, pull that down, and I pull this up. So I'm going to read to you now and see if in the next 7 minutes I have left that I'm going to tie now what happened in the Dark Ages. And I'm going to take this last right up here, just some quick insights, and then whatever I don't finish here, I'll finish up in 2 weeks. So this is the plague, right? So some quick notes about the plague. I just pulled it straight from Wikipedia. Just wanted to pull some generic information just to talk to you here. So remember what I'm talking about. Imagine you have a group of people and they're saying their superiority comes from genetics. My encouragement is to stop thinking like this. That's a bad way to think about life. Think about life that what makes us more successful is the principles we live by. And if you live by principles that are superior and you practice superior practice, you'll get superior results. And what the problem in the Dark Ages is that for years, all those years, people were practicing inferior principles and expecting superior results. And what we have is the Dark Ages. So we had more disease outbreak, more death, destruction. Why people are saying I'm the greatest. And where they were getting that from really was from the papacy. I'll cover this in the future, where I show that what it is when you listen to them talk, they talk so big and so brash, but they deliver nothing but death and destruction. So this is important to understand, that there's things that one do, if you do it, the results are going to be failure. And no matter how much you might say, I'm better, I'm greater, you're just destroying yourself because the ignorance is taking you down. And this is part of the problem. And so when we talk about plagues, the Black Death is a good example. We talk about diet, the pig is a good example of an inferior action that produces inferior results. What we need to do is accept superior principles, superior action, and we get superior results. That's just the point. So all the suffering we see right now. People say I'm the greatest, but there's all this suicide. Well, I'm the greatest, there's COVID-19. I'm the greatest, there's financial problem, drug problem, alcohol problem. Nothing is proven to be greatest more than the philosophy we live by. And we have to live by superior philosophy to get superior results. That's simply. So the plague is an infectious disease caused by the bacteria, and the bacterium Yersinia pestis. Symptoms include fever, weakness, headache. Usually this begins 1 to 7 days after exposure. In the bubonic form, there is also swelling of the lymph nodes, while in the septicemic form, tissues may turn black and die, which would more explain what we have called the Black Plague. And in the pneumonic form, shortness of breath, cough, and chest pain may occur, which will be similar to what happened with COVID-19. The transmission of the Y pestis, the what is it called, Yersinia pestis, to an uninfected individual is possible by any of the following means: droplets contact caused by coughing, sneezing on another person. So what is our modern solution for that? What's philosophy? What's the philosophy to stop the coughing and sneezing, the water droplets? So if somebody have the Black Plague, how you stop it? Cover your mouth, right? You see our simple philosophy, and that's in the Bible. The Bible says if a person have leprosy, they must cover their mouth, right? Why are they covering their mouth? Because if they go, it gets stopped on the mask. So that's why they say the mask does not remove all chance of getting COVID from another person. It just cuts the rate of transmission. That's all. Notice it. Simple. But if you don't believe in that everything is about miracle and casting out demons and all that, and suspicion and all kind of conspiracy and all of that, you'll never follow these principles. Notice next, direct contact. Touching an infected person, including sexual contact. That would make sense, right? Indirect contact, usually by touching soil contaminated or soil contamination or a contaminated surface. So what do we do for that in today's world? Contaminated surface or soil. You wash your hand, wipe down counters, surfaces. Do you see that superior understanding of how disease work? But notice here, we were fighting all last year to do some of these simple things. Instead of telling the people that say what we need to do is bleach down things and Lysol down things, they should have been doing it before. We were telling people to drink the Lysol, right? And drink the bleach. So, the total ignorance. Airborne transmission. If the microorganism can remain in the air for a long period. So they say with COVID, it could take a few seconds to a few minutes in the air. So how do we fix this, church? How do we fix the air transmission of disease? Right, we put in filters, UV lights, ozone, all of that, everything to basically treat the air, right? So that anything that is coming out and is suspended at the very water droplets or below that, you can be able to pull it in somewhere, treat it with UV, treat it with charcoal, treat it with ozone, treat it with all of that, kill it, dead, right? You see how the knowledge makes a superior outcome, not the claiming that there's something about my genetics that make me superior. Because none of us, it's the genetics, it's what we do, it's what we eat, what we drink, it's how we live, it's how we move out of our being. The result is going to be, man, you're doing better. Notice again, fecal oral transmission, usually from contaminated food or water source. What happened in the Dark Ages? They would take the feces and throw it out into the walkway and stuff. They would have the animals walking and dropping feces along the way. What would have happened when somebody walked? Remember these women? They would wear these long skirts that would sweep the ground. They would be sweeping feces along as they walk. Then they take the feces and take it into their house, and they wouldn't bathe once a week. They were bathing longer than once a week. So what would happen?
That's where the saying comes, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Right, because they will make it bathe.
Everybody will use that water.
And bathe, right? Yeah. Everybody would use the water and bathe, and the baby would bathe last, and then they take the baby and throw it out with the bathwater. Right, so if you notice there, fecal oral transmission, when COVID started, what was happening? They found that in China, because they squat to use the bathroom, number 2, you will have a lot of aerosolization of the virus or feces, and then people would inhale or take the feces in their mouth, and then they'll get sick, right? If you can taste it, that means it's droplets. If you can smell it, I should say. So what you do for that? The Bible tells us that you have to always bury feces.
The saying is, scientifically, if you can smell it, if you can smell it, you inhale it.
Yeah, you inhale it, right? But they probably get it on your tongue also. So usually from contaminated food and water. Vector-borne transmission carried by insects or other animals. So mosquitoes, fleas, so forth. So quick read again, almost there. The Black Death, also known as the pestilence, the great mortality, and the plague, was the bubonic plague pandemic occurring in Afro-Eurasia in 1346 through 53. It is the most fatal pandemic recorded in human history, resulting in the death of 75 to 200 million people in Eurasia, North Africa, peaking in Europe and in 1347 through 1351. Current evidence indicate that once it came ashore, the Black Death was in large part spread by human fleas. What kind of fleas? Like not bed bugs, but human fleas, which caused a pneumonic plague, and the person-to-person contact via aerosols, which pneumonic plague enable, thus explaining the very fast inland spread of the pandemic, which was faster than would be expected if the primary vector was rats. Rat fleas caused the bubonic plague. So for years, I always hear they say it's rat fleas. But now they're saying they think it's actually human fleas. And then because the person have a pneumonic plague, they're coughing. And as they cough, they're releasing it. So what do? You have to deal with that, right? But to deal with that, you have to have a concept of law, order, principle. You get results. You get results. The Black Death was the second disaster affecting Europe during the late Middle Ages. That first one being the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317, which I covered last year summer. And we're going to cover it again because I want to tie all this together before we end this quarter. And it's estimated to have killed 30 to 60% of Europe's population. 30 to 60%. Massive. In total, the plague may have reduced the world's population from an estimated 475 million to 350 to 375 million in the 14th century. The importance of hygiene was recognized only in the 19th century with the development of germ theory of disease. Until then, streets were commonly filthy, while live animals of all sorts around and human parasites abound, facilitating the spread of transmissible disease. So what we find is the animals. So notice here, even though we don't have the animals out there on the street, like each of us didn't come here with a horse or a horse and a cord. But now what we have the animals locked into buildings, and then we are growing them to eat them. We're eating more animals than anybody have ever eaten in history because we have methods to refrigerate and so forth these animals. And what it's doing is that for years and years, scientists are saying we're prepping ourselves up for a massive outbreak, and it's going to be from one of these animals. Most actually, the number one animal they're looking at is pigs. But from all these other animals they're looking at also, because we're abusing the animals and then eating them. And we've been worried about avian flu and other flu. And we have more coming. Notice again, last week they reported that they have 3 people died in Guinea, in Africa, from Ebola. So just imagine, people have been saying that we could have 2 plagues running at the same time. Not good. Italian chronicles and researcher, Chronicle, Angelino, about 2 more paragraphs ago, Tura, recorded his experience from Siena, where plague arrived in May 1348. He says now, father abandoned child, wife, husband, one brother, another. For this illness seemed to strike through the breath and sight. So he's saying, right? As so they died, and none could be found to bury the dead for money or friendship. Nobody would touch the dead. Everybody's scared. Members of a household brought their dead to the ditch as best they could without priest, without divine office. Great pits were dug and piled deep with the multitude of dead, and they died by the hundreds both day and night. As soon as those ditches were filled, more were dug. And I, Agnolo de Tura, buried my 5 children with my own hands. And there were also those who were so sparsely covered with earth that the dogs dragged them forth and devoured many bodies throughout the cities. There was no one who wept for any death, for all await death. And so many died that all believed it was the end of the world. Now remember, all what we covered a while ago could fix the problem. But remember, when all this is going on, which I'll cover in the future, there was a man in Rome sitting in the seat saying he's God and talking all kind of pompous words while death and destruction happening. And teaching the people to be prideful and selfish. And I want, just in case you missed that before I read my last 2 paragraphs here, there's some men on TV talking about prosperity gospel and talking about your best days ahead of you. Teaching no principle and no theory. They're lawless. And they're encouraging their members not to follow any quarantine, nothing, while people are dying in their church and outside their church. While the same year, Houston, Texas, which the #1 preacher for this type of foolishness, is down there telling the people the best days are ahead of you, best days are ahead of you, prosper, prosper, prosper. And pure disaster going on. And they refuse to follow any principle or any law. They're lawless. And that's why I'm studying. So I want to show you Catholicism in the old world, Protestantism in the new world. It's the same dark philosophy where no law, no rule, just let anything go, follow no protocol, and even disease run into, Jesus is mighty saved. Jesus will protect you from the disease in Jesus' name. Why people are just dropping dead anyhow. Notice here, renewed religious fervor and fanaticism bloom in the wake of the Black Death. Some Europeans targeted various groups as Jews, friars, foreigners, beggars, pilgrims. Notice a hate for foreigners always come up. And lepers, Romani, sorry. I think those are the gypsies and stuff. Blaming them for the crisis. Lepers and others with skin diseases such as acne. So if you have some spots on your face, you're done. And psoriasis were killed throughout Europe. So imagine a child going through puberty and they chop the head off. Because it's massive ignorance because it's just cover your mouth, man. Because the 14th century's healers and governments were at loss to explain and stop the disease, Europeans turned to astrological force, earthquakes, and the poisoning of well by Jews as a possible reasoning for the outbreak. Now the Jews weren't suffering as much. But remember, the Jews wash their hands, social distance, wash before cleaning. They need pork, they need bats, they need cats, they need dogs, they need spiders, they need cockroach, they need maggots. And so they remain healthier. That makes sense, right? Because somebody challenged me one day, said, Lord, if I can take it, I should be able to eat it. Maggots, that's what it is. I'm like, you're crazy. Anyhow, Jews paused under the outbreak. Many believe that the epidemic was a punishment by God for their sins and could be relieved by winning God's forgiveness. There were many attacks on Jewish communities. The Strasbourg massacre in February 14th, something, we covered some of that. 2,000 Jews were murdered. In August 1349, the Jewish community of Mainz and Cologne were annihilated. By 1351, 60 major and 150 smaller Jewish communities had been destroyed. During this period, many Jews relocated to Poland, where they received a warm welcome from King Casimir the Great. So what happened? The Jews practiced certain principles. They weren't dying. They got blamed for the disease. That was just a simple understanding of certain biblical Old Testament principles that the Christians who reject the Bible but say they're Christians did not learn and did not accept. And so because they're ignorant of those principles, those health laws, They went ahead and started massacring anybody that they think has acne because they don't know about Accutane. I don't use Accutane, I'm just saying. They don't know about any way to treat the acne. They start massacring Jews because the Jews weren't dying, so they think the Jews are the one causing the disease because they thought it was a curse of God, and probably if you kill the Jews because they killed Christ, you could get it. And then you start this history of white supremacists hating Jews. But what the end result? The white supremacists hate the Jews, but they still didn't stop the plague. See the problem? They kill the Jews, they kill the foreigners, they kill all the hate for this person, hate for that person, hate for that person. And those white supremacists to this day, they're the same mindset. They hate anybody that is foreigner, they hate the foreigners, they hate the Mexican, they hate everybody, hate, but it's still not solving their problems. You see the problem? It still doesn't fix their problem because the problem can be dealt with in a very simple manner. You stop the transmission, you deal with the disease, you wash your hands. How many times they're going to tell people wash their hands, they still go to the bathroom, and you know that the disease is coming from oral fecal transmission. They touch everything in the bathroom, the toilet really, the toilet bowl, they interact with that. Then they come out, don't wash their hand, and then they get sick and they wonder why. The pig consumption is a major problem. I'm going to present some things here. In this time period is where they came up with the word. I'll say this last word here. They start using the word quarantine. I think quarantine is some Italian Latin word that has to do with being locked away for 30 to 40 days, something like that. This is where they get the word. Look it up, right? Quarantine. So what happened? If you could quarantine everybody for 40 days or 30 days, you would probably cut the transmission of this disease and shut the disease down. Because Taiwan, New Zealand, Australia have proven you can quarantine the disease away. Because the disease needs a host to transmit to another person. So if it doesn't have a host, it can't transmit. Or if you could practice scrubbing the air, stopping the droplets from getting out of the person's mouth, you could quarantine the disease literally by methods that are used modernly. But you'd have to have people to comply and understand the intelligence of it. But you can't get people to do that because you have pastors, especially in certain locations, telling people, you are free, and this is a free country, and you should not be told to do anything. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, but this reminds me of, Dark Ages. This is why for 1,260 years, Europe could not get out of the Dark Ages. Why? Because they had people telling them that you don't have to follow the principle, just believe in God, we can exorcise the demon. It's probably a demon of peanut butter, or a demon of a banana, or a demon of something. And you couldn't get the disease to go away because what happened? They did not understand. You can't have filth everywhere. But yet, and you hear me say it, and I'm going to show you, the Pope was teaching Europe at the time to have pompous words even against God, and taught them this prideful supremacist concept in spite of death and destruction all around. And we're going to tie it up not next week, but the following week. I think this is the last Sabbath. This is the last Sabbath? Oh, so next Sabbath I'm going to tie it up. I'm ahead of myself. So I'm going to show how now that arrogant talk while death and destruction is going on. And we saw that for the last 5 years. This arrogancy and talking about we're the greatest, but yet following no principle. And what happened? The death rate rise and the death rate pile up. And that's the same thing happened in the Dark Ages. And I'll show you it here. It'll be very clear from the Bible. Speaking words that are so high, but yet doing nothing. While if you just humble yourself, wash your hands, wear your mask, take your vitamin D, take your zinc, make sure you stock up on your minerals. You do your exercise, you take care of your body, avoid these genetical, transgenic foods, and you'll find that you'll get the disease, but you have better outcome. There's so many people can't say it over, can say it until I'm blue in the face. They're deficient in zinc, they're deficient in vitamin D, and they're going to die from an inflammatory disease based upon primarily those deficiency. And they don't have to die, but they're dying unnecessarily. Let us not be like ignorant people claiming that we're the best and that we're greatest while we're not doing the greatest thing. Do the great things. Bless yourself. Take care of yourself. At this time, I'm just going to pray to close because we're out of time. So just bow your heads with me for prayer. As I say, I know we rise up next week, so come back next week when I try to show what is it that really taught them in the face of death and destruction to talk about they're the greatest. Because it make no sense. Let's pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you for the blessings of your word. Thank you for the insights, not just insights from the Bible, dear Lord, but insights from history and insights from the current scientific theories as men try to investigate what's really happening. Pray to you and bless us, dear Lord. Illuminate our mind. Lead us on a path of righteousness that we might take the precautions and follow the rules that you have laid down in nature and in your word. May you bless us, dear Lord, in this upcoming week, this upcoming tri-week, that we might be able to be productive, both mentally, physically, socially, and that we might do, dear Lord, the right thing. Bless not only ourselves, but our fellow human beings. Be with us, dear Lord, we pray for Christ's sake. Amen. Well, thanks for being with us here at Covenant Advent Church. I'm looking forward to having this discussion going forward next Sabbath, looking to continue our talks on what we call what God must do for you, because there's things that God must do for us because we are his children, the sheep of his pasture. But until then, looking forward to talking to you again. God bless, good night, and stay safe. And remember, protect yourself.